The features that you have to implement, the enhancements or the defect fixes, they still have to be completed on time. And to do this effectively, your new team members have to understand the existing code base. So usually what happens is the existing team members who have an understanding of the code base, they set up a session with these new team members in trying to explain in the code base, educate them about the code base, and later they can take it on their own and go through the code base to improve their understanding. Now, when such a session is in progress, when the existing team members and the new team members get together with the pure intention of improving the understanding of the code base, if a code is really difficult to understand, this would be the vibe of that session. The team would spend a lot of time. In fact, they would waste a lot of time and come out of this session without a good understanding of the code base. Ultimately, the team will be frustrated and tired, and no one would properly understand what the code does. This is not a healthy situation for a project to continue, because if the developers do not understand the code properly, they cannot apply the new changes or introduce new features properly. So how do we overcome this challenge? How do we make sure that the entire team understands the code base properly and they come to that understanding with ease? I'm sure most of you have guessed the answer by now. You have to make sure that you write clean code to ensure that the code is understandable and it can be easily modified, so that even the existing team members or the new team members would have a good time and they can easily, efficiently go through the code and understand the code base. What does clean code mean? Now, the first thing that I did when I was learning clean code is to Google what clean code is. And I found a lot of results, a lot of definitions. But one thing that caught my eye, and one thing that I remembered up to this particular day, is the definition given by Grady Booch. Grady Booch is a pioneer in software engineering. He has been the leader in developing unified modeling language. We call it UML. And he has contributed a lot to improve software engineering as a practice. So Booch says clean code is simple and direct. Clean code reads like a well-written story. Clean code never hides the developer's intent, but rather is full of crisp summarizations and straightforward lines of code. So, what does this mean? If you analyze the definition on clean code provided by Booch, he highlights 4 major qualities of a cleaner code base. He says a cleaner code base is simple and direct, and it has a nice flow like a well-written story. As when you read your code, it's like you're reading a story. There is a very nice flow that allows you to understand it better. It doesn't hide the developer's intention. As in, when you read through the code, it is very clear what the developer wanted to do with those lines of code. And it also nicely summarizes the developer's intent without any ambiguity, as in it clearly summarizes. So if you have these qualities in your code base becomes easier to read and understand, easier to change, easier to test what you wrote, and it also becomes easier to add new features by adding new code and minimizing the changes that you have to introduce to your existing code. The 4 qualities that Booch highlights are the essence of writing clean code. As you can see in this diagram, where it has nicely summarized those 4 attributes, which are readability, maintainability, testability, and extensibility. These are the four main qualities that any developer would have to align their mindset when you say that you're writing clean code. Now, in this lesson, we would understand how to write readable code, the techniques with a few examples in Python, but we would not go into a deeper end on the maintainability, extensibility, and testability. However, towards the end of this session, we will discuss about those three in a little bit more detail and provide a few references so that you could study about these on your own. One important point to understand is applying these qualities to your code means you do it at the very first time that you're writing your code. Why? In my experience, where I understood my code the most is at the point of writing the code. Because I'm thinking the logic and I'm converting that logic into code. A couple of days later, when I look at the same code, I have to put an effort to understand the code. And if I wait longer, I would get bombarded with more work, as in different priorities or critical things that I have to look into. So I could completely forget to, change code or clean code. So one important thing to take note is that applying these principles or qualities to your code has to happen at the very first time that you're writing your code. This brings us to the end of part 1 of this lesson. So let's summarize what we learned so far. We understood that code bases change over time. We also understood that the developer teams who work on code bases also change over time. And the code we write should be easy to understand, not only by the team members, but by the authors who wrote the code, easier to modify, easier to test, and easier to extend. And if we do a good job in applying clean coding techniques, we should be able to align our code with those qualities. And at the same time, we should be able to help the team who continuously change with new team members to understand the code in a more easier manner. I hope you have understood and enjoyed the concepts that we discussed during part 1. And in part 2, we are going to discuss about writing readable code in Python. We would use some scenarios and examples and sample Python code as well. I hope you are excited for part 2. Until I speak to you in the next section of this lesson, have a good one.